Hello, and I'm David Weissman, that's the estimate questions today, and I'd just like to know, how did you react when you heard the war was over? Do you remember when you learned that Germany had been defeated?
Not when Germany was defeated, when we got liberated. This is the period. I was staying, like I told you, with my girlfriend from the convent who had come to pick me up and stay with her parents. And I would say that we got liberated, I think, Brussels, where my mother was, got liberated in August. I think ours was like a week or two later, because it was like two-pronged. They came up from the south. On one side were the British coming up more to the small towns, and the Americans came through, went straight up to the capital, Brussels. So it was like two-pronged. The Americans were ahead of us a little bit. We didn't. And in that little town that we were staying in, Louvain, with my friend, you can just imagine, we heard that we were going to be liberated by troops, but we didn't know yet who they were, whether they were English or the Americans, we didn't know at all. And then all of a sudden we hear, like they were, when they were withdrawing, the Germans, there were like many little bridges in Louvain and surrounding it, and they were like blowing them up as they were retreating. And then, as we were in the house, we went to the window, my girlfriend and I, and we looked, and like, you wouldn't believe it, like you see in the movies, the soldiers were crawling on the floor in the street, and like each time, you know, the front door from the building is a little bit receded from the front. They were like laying in that door on the floor, crouched and with their gun, just. And that's how they overtook street by street by street. And as we were watching the window, and being that I had English for 4 years already, one of the soldiers shouted, "Get away from the window, get away from the window," because he was scared, you know, that we were gonna be shot at by the Germans shooting. And that's how when they got the street covered, then they came in, marching in, the soldiers. So we ran downstairs, we ran out, we ran to the first soldier, we hugged him and kissed him. Oh, and I didn't even realize yet that they were the British, you know. And we said, oh God, are we? And they didn't even know what it was for me. For me it was double freedom, you know, to be relieved of the thinking of that every day I could be taken and who knows where. It was just unbelievable that joy is immeasurable. You never experienced something like that in your life, ever again. It's like probably these poor people today, whether it be Katrina or where they got now the earthquake when they come up. It's just such an unbelievable, overpowering feeling. But then, since I was liberated, I wanted to know whether Brussels was liberated already, and they said yes. And then I said to I stayed another 2-3 days with them, because we wanted the Germans to be a little further away yet from that town. And then I said, I'm going to my mother, I have to go. And I left, and that was unbelievable feeling. Now, coming to my mother, and she was still living in the house from the resistance fighter. But now she was liberated and I was liberated, and we heard that the World Jewish Congress was helping the Jews who had survived. So we went to that place wherever it was. You know, I want you to know something. You're in total shock anyway. You don't even know how you react. I mean, You don't even know whether you're alive or not. It's such a eerie feeling. So we went there, but what I do remember is they said, we're giving you money for rent, and we're giving you money for second-hand furniture. Go to a second-hand place. What do you need? So we figured we needed a bed to sleep, and we needed a table and chairs, you know, and maybe some dishes, and maybe some linen. Yet nothing. So they enumerated and they figured it out, and they gave us some money, and we went and looked for a place where there was, you know, second-hand furniture. And we found an apartment in an attic in the Rue Vendel. And we decided, and it was just like a kitchenette, and a place for a table with 4 chairs, and right behind it a small room, but a double bed would fit, but not a shift robe. I don't think we could put a shift robe there. We just stacked it, I think, on boxes in the corner. And that's how we started. And then after a few days, my mother said to me, look, you're the oldest now, and you got to take care of your mother and your sister. You know, that's how it was in the olden times. And I said, yes, I'm gonna go look for a job. And I found a job, and this gentleman was Jewish gentleman with a small business he opened. He needed a typist and somebody to answer the phone. I said, fine, I can do that. And somehow when I was there, but he was such, how should I say, a hard man. But I tried not to be too much in this. I tried to do my job, I remember. And then the one day comes to me, I was just telling that story, because people always think they can't lie. There's some people, I was brought up like that, you don't lie. It's always hard for me to say lie. If I feel it's not worth it, I'd rather not answer. But if I need to, I will lie. Even though my father always said, oh my God, lying is like the biggest sin to him. But even here, I hear older folks, they need something and they will say, but I can't lie. So I realize they haven't gone through much in their life, because if they go, you lie when you have to. So this guy said, I'm working, and I'm telling that story too sometimes. Here I am, 17, out of the convent, shy, you know, reserved, I'm afraid of my shadow. And here he comes and he said to me, you know, my wife wants strawberries. And this is midwinter in Belgium. Where are you going to find strawberries? And you better don't come back. Go and look, bring me back strawberries, and don't come back without them, or I fire you. Now, I needed that job. I needed to bring my mother the money. What am I going to do? So I figured, how am I going to find strawberries? Where do I know where there's a store with strawberries? But I went out, and that's when you learn to put aside every bit of shyness that you ever had within you, and every bit of anxiety. I went to the main street. I knew I had to go to the main street. Anybody that came across me, please, could you help me? Do you know where I could find strawberries? And after a few people, there was one person who said to me, yes, I know where, and I'll show you where. And I did go, and I found the strawberries, and I came back. It's then that you realize that you are getting aggressive in a way. It builds the aggression in you, that you have to do things even though you don't want to do them, but you have to for survival. And then you start realizing more and more, yes, you you should be truthful, but you should learn to lie too, in order to get what you need. You see what you need, not because for the sake of lying, and not for the sake for nothing, but for survival. Teaches you a lot. See, and this is where I feel a lot of the young people here in America don't experience that, and sometimes fail because they don't get the opportunity to start with it and then develop a certain sense of conquering things that you were unable to think of that you would conquer. Yeah.
And when did you meet your husband?
Well, this was now, right, we are now, let's say, after the liberation. There is survival. I go to work, and my mother is trying also to find some sort of work. How now we find out from the government that we are allowed to get wool. Wool was sold only on the black market. It was just black market all over because you couldn't get it. But the government allowed you to buy wool from, let's say, England or Australia. You could buy wool on regular price, not black market price, which was outrageous, but regular price. And why is my mother entitled? Because we had a knitwear factory that I told you that my father went bankrupt in, and being he was the second largest manufacturer, and they saw how much he paid in taxes and everything, they allowed my mother to buy a lot of wool, but with one condition: she could not sell it, the wool. She had to manufacture. Now, how do you find a manufacturer? This is after the liberation. The people who were in that business, the knitwear, were mostly Jews, and now they're gone. Who are you gonna do? But you see, there's another element within the Jewish people. We have always bothered, you know, with one another. You give me that, I give you that. And there's always an in-between person that you can get who helps you. Let's say, it's the same like with weddings. In order to get together, a man and a woman, they go to a matchmaker. There was always these time, but the matchmaker was, let's say, for girl and boy. But here there was also a matchmaker, which we didn't call a matchmaker, for bringing, let's say, I want wine. I don't know where to get wine. Somebody knows. There's somebody who knows where you can get wine. So you go to that person and he brings you then to the person. It's always that commercial type of things, which was all over. So we found a person who said he knows of some survivors who are looking for work too, and they are knitters. Now the question is how they're gonna knit. I mean, they haven't got anything. Again, they went to the World Jewish Congress and said, we would like to make a living, but we need a machine. So World Jewish Congress gave them money. It was, I remember like today, like about $110 to buy that machine that he needed. Now, my husband there were 7 people who survived in one apartment. It was his father, his mother, his brother, his sister, her husband, and her husband's brother. There were 7 people who survived, never went out for 2 years. You know, and the resistance fighters came and brought them food. And also tobacco, but not real tobacco, to keep them occupied to make cigarettes. They smoked them too, to their detriment, but they smoked them and they also made them. They were the ones, so my husband went to the World Jewish Congress, and he wasn't my husband at the time, and he got a machine. The father knew how to knit, the brother, the younger brother knew, and he himself knew how to knit. They knit on that machine 24 hours. They took shifts. And my mother got the wool. She found out about, she brought the wool to them, and they knitted, they manufactured, and we sold it you know, to hotels, to certain stores. And there too, my husband, being that he was cableman, my mother said, how about you being the salesman, you know? So he made some extra money there too. But I never went to see him, and I wasn't even involved because I was working now for the Americans. I'd switched then and I worked for the American PX. So I never was involved with that, and my mother was involved with the matchmaker there in between. He carried for her the packages, and she went to pay them, and I never was involved for 2 years while I was working for the Americans. But then, one day, I don't remember, my mother wasn't feeling very good, and I had already finished working for the Americans, and now I was working for the World Jewish Congress. I got a job there in the research department. Why research? Because we got tons of letters from Americans who were looking for their relatives in Europe, mainly Belgium. They said they have a brother or the nephew or an uncle or someone, and they wanted to know whether they had survived. And we had all the books, the catalogs that the German had kept, where we could spot right away this one is. Of course, names were very different. Let's say they came to America and they made it Newman, but it wasn't Newman. It was Neumann. It could be spelled Nyman, could spelled any which way. So we used to take that name, and we were like 4 people. One was from Hungary, one from Czechoslovakia, the Belgian, and one from Germany. And we kind of analyzed the name. I was the youngest, but we kind of analyzed the name, what it could be. Like for instance, the name Newman in America, which was Neumann in German, and Nyman maybe in Czechoslovakia, the people from Czechoslovakia, Jews, also changed their names sometimes. And it became, and he, the Czechoslovakian, knew that. He said this could be Novotny, was a very Jewish name too. And then we looked up Novotny, the name is there. And sometimes it used to take us 3-4 days until we could find what the American wanted. And of course, most of the time, they were not there, and we had to answer them. And, you know, we had to answer them, and being that I spoke and wrote English, I answered the letter then to America and said whatever. The others also spoke English, I can't say it, all that. So that was an interesting position. But after 2 years, somehow, now we're liberated in 45, the war ended 44. I worked for the Americans from 45 to 46, like a year and a half. And then for the Congress, World Jewish Congress. And one day my mother wasn't feeling good, and I don't know why, but she said, why don't you go and pay them, you know. I didn't even know where they were, but I found a place, and I came down. And as I'm coming down, my husband had heard that I worked for the Americans, but I loved to go dancing at night. You know, they had a dancing there, and I danced with them, and I met a lot of Americans, and I had a lot of propositions to come to America. But I don't know, I just said they were wonderful young men, wonderful, decent, such decent young men, really. So good and so understanding, even though most were Protestants, and I had never heard of Protestants. I didn't even know what it meant, because to me Christians were only Roman Catholics. I didn't know any. But they were such nice people, and you know, I always felt maybe they're anti-Semitic or so, and I used to say, you know, I'm Jewish, and invariably everyone used to say, that's okay, why are you saying that? I said, well, maybe you don't want to, you know, dance with a Jewish girl or whatever. No, that's what I admired. I said, these Americans are just wonderful. you know. And because you see, the Roman Catholics, like my girlfriend, she had to go and ask her father confessor whether she could be a friend with a Jew. Yeah, it was so indoctrinated that they shouldn't, God forbid. And I used to think, or maybe they don't want to get together, so it's no. But, and I must say, I met a wonderful American, he was from Texas. I loved it when he sang these cowboy songs. He was divorced and had a child, and he proposed, and I went with him for a while, and I said to him, look, I hope you're not upset about it, because I don't want to make you feel bad. I was saved by Christians, but I cannot marry a Christian. I have to marry a Jew, you know? I can't betray my father. So he says, you know what? He said to me, you know what? I'll convert and I'll become a Jew. I said, no, I would never ask that of you. But he was really serious. And I thought that was so beautiful. But somehow he had to go to the front or somewhere. You know, we went together for 6 months, but then he did. But as I said, as I'm walking down there to pay my, you know, my husband the money, as I'm walking down, his younger brother was there. And I didn't hear it, you know, because they were in the ladder room. Oh, the younger brother said, listen, if you don't want her, I want her. I'll ask her for a date. But as I come down and I paid him, and that's the first time I ever met him, and my mother dealt with him for 2 years. He said to me, would you like to go on a date? I said, yeah, why not? So I went out with him, and that's how it developed. That's how I met my husband, and we got engaged a few months later and married like 6 months later.
And how did you decide to go to the U.S.? Why didn't you want to stay?
No, I'll tell you what happened. My husband, when he smuggled himself into Belgium, he smuggled himself from Germany to Belgium, and his family, they were illegally there. When he came in, he had already papers to go to America from relatives. They had intended to go to America, but you know, with the, in between the war and all that, his older brother was here already, but they didn't make it. But they had the intent to go to America, so then they went to the to the embassy. And German, he was born in Germany, and Germans, they went right away. Poles, forget about it. If you were born in Poland, there was like 5-year wait. Germans, pretty quick. You could go pretty quick. And also, he had already applied for it right after he got liberated. So that was like in 45, early 45. So that's when he went in 47 to America. So, you know, a few years. And his parents had gone because of his older brother. They came, so he could go too. And I didn't want to stay in Europe. I had made up my mind. I didn't want to stay. It was too sad. It was too anti-Semitic for me. I didn't want to stay there. I was either going to go to Palestine at the time, or I didn't want to stay in Europe. I said, that's it. And being I met him, and he said, I'd like to go to America. I said, that's fine. I'm going to America. It was hard. It was so hard. Today, when I think about it, I came here. He came here before me. And he was a camp counselor, and he had earned about $100 for the whole season. And he had that kind of money on him when I came. And I came with $25. And that was our fortune. But the first we went to the Jewish agency because I needed clothes, I needed other things when I came. And they wrote up what I needed. It was like $65 in those years. dress, a coat, whatever. And my husband 55, they gave him $55, me 65. They said, you're young, you can make it. At that time, would you believe it, that in New York, on Fifth Avenue, you could buy a dress for $2.50. A nice dress. It just, when you think of it today, it's like insane, you know. I can't even believe this, that this really happened. It's just unbelievable, but it was very hard to get a job. I was going to do dishes and all that. Then I became a nanny, found a place as a nanny, worked there for 3 months, and they gave me $150 a month, which I thought, oh my God. And then we got our own apartment, and I used to say to my husband, because in Europe we didn't have any bathrooms, you know. You had like outhouses mostly, or one on the floor for 5 apartments, you know, up to the attic. There was only one, just a toilet, that's it, and a sink. You washed yourself in a basin, you know, when you boiled up water. So I used to say, and there were bathhouses where you went to take a bath or a shower. I used to say to my husband when I came to America, if I ever own my own bathroom, I'm going to feel like a millionaire. And when we got our first apartment, where I had to pay, you see, there was no apartments to be gotten in New York. You just couldn't get an apartment. You had to bribe. Who did you have to bribe? The janitor. Now, my mother-in-law got us an apartment, but we had to bribe the janitor. I had like saved in just a few months, I had saved like, what I got 150, I had like $450. Because my husband worked a little bit, not much, and being the nanny, we slept in that house. I didn't have to pay no rent and all that. So I'd saved the $450 and I felt so great. And we had to bribe the janitor $300. And painting, we had to pay $100 for painting the apartment. So the money went, but I didn't care because we had an apartment. It was not a furnished room, you know. Furnished room is unbelievably dirty and all that. So then I had my own bathroom. You know, I will as much money as I'll ever have in my life, I'll never have that feeling as when I had my own bathroom. It's so overwhelming. It is so unbelievable happiness that I thought I would never have. You know, but afterwards you get used to it. But it's an unbelievable feeling. Your own bathroom. And you can take a shower or wash yourself whenever you want. Not as a designated hour or something. You know, all these things young people don't realize how fortunate they are. And now when you're going to take a shower, you're going to think about it. How fortunate Americans are. So then, when I was here, as I said to you, it was very hard to get a job because there was that underlying anti-Semitism, which I talked about wherever you went. They wanted my mother's maiden name, and the minute I said Rosenfeld, we'll let you know. After a while, I got wise to it. This is New York, 1947, 48. Yeah, terrible. Until, as I said to you, I beat them to their game. Like I say, you learn for survival. So you say, what's your name? Rachel. What's your mother's name? Mary Bodner. Father's name? John Bodner. Invariably, I got the job. You know, you have to go through, do you know, to find a job? I don't know whether today they're doing the same thing. Years ago was the resume. I mean, now it's the resume. No resume. They give you a book with maybe 30 pages, and it's got like little holes, and you punch the little hole with your pen, you know, and they ask the most stupid questions. How many times do you go to the bathroom during the day on the job? Do you get along with other people? Don't ask. And you know, yes or no, yes or no. And you have to, these used to be the tests for applying for a job as a typist, as a secretary or whatnot. Yeah, it's incredible, but I made it somehow. There must be a lot of people that couldn't go through that. They were too annoyed by that or whatever. But I got some good jobs, I can't say, and I worked, and then I became pregnant. I got pregnant, and I said to
What year was it?
I got pregnant in 1950. I should say 51, because he was born in October 51. But luckily my mother had gone to Israel. She wanted to go to Israel. She went to Israel. And but I had registered her. Before I left, I said, Mom, if you ever want to come, you're Polish citizen, I'm registering you with the American consulate. And if you get called or whatever, you just say no, but let it lay there, which was such a good thing that I did in 1947, because when I applied that she wanted to come from Israel to America, she was already registered 3 years, and she came in those years, being that I made the application to become a citizen, she could come on the second preference. See, as a wife and a husband, you come, and a child, you come on first preference. But if you are a parent and you make an application to become a citizen, the parent can come on the second preference, which speeded everything up, and she came just before my son was born, which was very good. Happy that he came. And then somehow my husband, he worked as a cab driver. You know, even though he could have made much more money being a knitter, but he didn't want it. He said he wants something else, and he became a cab driver. And it wasn't that much money, and it was really hard to make ends meet. And being that I knew how to sew, I had gone to Fashion Institute in Belgium, remember I told you, and I went, he worked all day from morning, you know, that's like a certain hour that they go, from 5 to 4, that's there, and then the other cab driver takes over 4:35 till the morning, and then he comes in. And being that I was trying to figure out how am I going to make extra money, and you know what they did? They gave you, if you wanted to type at home, I think it was, if you wanted to type 1,000 envelopes, I think it was 1,000, you could make $5. So I said, no way. 1,000 envelopes for $5, but you know, even though I was going to do it, but I said, how am I going to do that? But then, you know, it wasn't like today that people were afraid to go out at night. In Brooklyn, the dress shops were open till 10 o'clock at night. And why? Because when the husbands came home, they used to go with their women to these little dress shops, and they got alterations there. It was right away fixed for them. So, you know, there were girls who were sewing, but they wanted the regular hours, you know, let's say from 10 to 6, but they didn't want to stay late. So I went and I asked them whether they could use somebody. We had 3 little dress shops in my neighborhood, and I asked them whether they could use somebody for sewing, hand sewing or whatever, because I said I knew how to do alterations, which I really didn't, but I figured out I could do whatever. So they hired me. So my husband came home 4 o'clock, The kids were, or 4:30, the kids, I had 2 infants by then. The kids were bathed already and fed and in their crib already by 5. And I had cooked in between. 5 o'clock, my husband and I, we sat down, we ate. 5:30, the dishes went in the dishwasher. I got dressed and I went to the dress shop from 6 to 10 at night for 4 hours. I was so thrilled. For 4 hours, something that I like to do, $5, $1.25 an hour. But you know what? 5 nights a week, 5 days a week, $25, that paid for all my groceries, and I saved $5 I put away. I said, that I gotta save. Yeah. And I like doing it. Besides, I like doing it. After a while, the women who used to come into the store, they used to say, Rachel, we like to go and buy by Macy's, by whatever. Would you do my alterations? I said, yeah, but how am I going to go about it? I need to buy a machine. So I bought a machine. First I bought a plain machine, you know, but then I bought a factory machine because I was used to sewing a factory machine, which is much faster and better, you know. So then I bought a factory machine, and during the day while the kids were sleeping or something, I used to alter. They came to me because I lived like 2 blocks away, and they used to come, the women, and I made extra money that way. And that's how you survive, and you make the money. And that used to be most of my life, yeah.
And how long did you live in New York for?
I lived in New York really from 1947 that I was there until I came here to Baltimore in '91.
Why did you move?
Because I have 2 sons. One son became a librarian in New York, and he moved in to Staten Island. He bought a house in Staten Island. I had a wife and a child by then. And my other son had gone to Israel for 7 years, but came back to America and settled here in Baltimore. He came in 1990 and went to Baltimore. And then being he was here 1 year and he bought a house, then I knew he would stay here. And then I asked him whether he would want me to come here, and said yes, and then I came here in '91.
Was your husband alive then, or?
My husband, no, he had died already in 1988 with a cancer bout. He was pretty ill in a way throughout his life because just being hidden and never going out for over 2 years, it's like a prison sentence. And it did work on him, which I didn't realize at the time, but it must have worked on him mentally, because why? When every time there was a crisis, he got ill, either like a nerve in the shoulder, a nerve in the leg, and then later on the cancer. From the smoking the weeds that they did when they were young, and smoking weeds, there must have been something in the weeds, because like his sister's brother-in-law, who was their husband's brother, also was doing the weeds and smoke, and he died also of cancer a year after my husband, so there must have been something.
And did you work in that dress shop all those years?
Well, I did first at home, because I wanted to be at home. I had to take care of the babies. It was very hard. How could you get a babysitter or anybody? You would pay more than you make. But then when they got to be, when the oldest one was about, it was like 13, I went and I started going out of the house. I didn't want to work at home anymore. I worked in dress shops then, during the day while they were in school. So I was home with them when they came home, part-time, like, you know. And my husband opened a little with a partner, little grocery business, but it didn't make much money. It was a very hard life. And then afterwards, little by little, he had to sell the business because they were not making the two. He went then for a bigger company and he became a manager. First assistant, and then he was a manager for wall buns, which was a big concern. And you know, we life became a little bit easier, and then I went to work steady outside. And as the boys got older, I could work later or whatever.
I remember in one of our previous interviews, you had said that due to all that you had been through, it's like life doesn't seem as joyful. You said, but
Yeah.
you said this changed. Did this change when you had your sons?
Yes, I was very thrilled. This was part of happiness, you know. To have your own children is just unbelievable. It's such a purpose in life. Maybe before it just seemed, you know, you marry, you live together fine, but children make you really appreciate life more. Yeah, they were my joy and my happiness. And working and all that was nothing to me because I wanted them to have a good life. And then we used to go to the Catskill Mountains, to the hotels, and that was real joy with them. So they were, I'm not saying that it was always down, but let's say it was, in a way, there was the ups and downs, you know, where you felt, oh, it's so wonderful, but there was always something happening. The car broke down and you needed extra. It was mainly the money worries. The money worries, you know, and that's why that is so important for young people to realize that the money worries overtakes everything. You know, everything falls by the wayside if you don't feel you're going to make it this month. You know, where am I going to do? What am I going to do to old men? You know, and you'll probably go through life with that too. But you know something, in the long run, when I'm looking back at it today, I say, why was I so worried? It always worked out. Somehow, it does work out. But it puts such a stress on you, you know. And then I had a mother-in-law that didn't help either. Very possessive. No one was good enough for her sons, you know, and that too. And I'm not the type of person to open a big mouth and to, you know, say shut up. Did you see the movie Monster-in-Law? With, then you'll get an idea.
You said it took you, when did you go to Europe? You said you visited once? And
yes, I did go there in, it must have been 12 years ago. Yeah, I must have gone 93 there, because it was 12 years. No, I'm sorry, 95. They came to visit me 93. I went 95. Exactly 10 years that I saw the one that's coming this week, yes, 95. I went back and because I never wanted to go back. I never wanted. But somebody, like I mentioned before, said to me, you're going to regret it when you're going to be older. You may say to yourself, why didn't I ever go back? So I said, well, that's something that I'm thinking about, and I did go back. And you know something? I didn't miss a thing. I was so right. I realized one thing. There's certain things within me when I think about a certain thing and make a decision. Always, like I say, the first decision seems to be the right decision. If it says don't go, it's the same with the telephone or anything. I'm ready to leave or something. Now stay another half an hour sitting, and there's an important telephone call. You know, there's like, I don't know what it is, but it's like something you have to heed, that little voice that tells you what to do. And my mother always used to say, the first one, accept the first one. Don't even think of the second. And she was right.
And so you just visited Antwerp when?
I went to Antwerp to visit the daughter from my best friend from the convent, and I stayed there for a few days. But then I stayed with another lady in Londerzeel, which is next to Brussels, and she was the woman, the companion who helped the monk who had helped me. She paid attention to him in the last years of his life. So I had invited her when she came before I went there to come and stay with me because, you know, I thought it was such a wonderful thing. And I went to Londerzeel, and again, it's unimportant to tell you what it was, but I went to the bank with my friend to change some money. And again, I heard one guy make an anti-Semitic remark. And I said, they'll never change. They'll never change. And you could give me 100 million, the sky, anything, that I should ever live in Belgium. Ever. I don't want to feel, you remain I was born there, I was raised there. You remain a stranger forever. If you're not their kind, forget it. It's so wonderful here in America. So wonderful. You know, one is so accepting of another human being. There are some, but on the whole, you know, you're not going to hear any remarks like that over here.
Did you, besides Europe, have you ever done some world traveling?
Well, the only time I went to Israel was right after my husband passed away in '88, because he had never flown, and my son had gone to Israel before that. The youngest son, he couldn't find, it was the hippie era, he couldn't find himself here. He went all over, and he told me he wants to find his roots. Remember that? You were not here during that time, but all these young people, I want to find my roots. So every one of them, if they were from Czechoslovakia, they went there, they went there, they went. He wanted to go to Israel. I said, fine. And he stayed there for 7 years and married my daughter-in-law. But then, and I couldn't even go to the wedding because my husband was already ill at that time with another illness that wouldn't leave him. He had like a fullness in his ear. We went to every doctor. In 5 years, we must have gone to maybe 20, 30 doctors each time in New York. Every clinic, every doctor we could find, maybe they could help him. He had like, he explained it to me, when you jump into water and your ear fills up with water and you want to get the water out and you can't get that water out, and it just keeps on pressing on you and you feel you want to lay back. When he laid back, he had relief. And he used to say to me all the time, why don't they put me already in the box? You know? And this went on for 5 years. But that must have been already the beginning of the cancer that went through his body. And nobody could find it. Nobody. Blood test, everything you can imagine. I spent my time in waiting rooms by the doctor. And you see, my husband had worked in Germany when he was young, and they were going to give him a Social Security pension. But he had to go to a German doctor. And the woman said to me, if the German doctor that observes him for 10 minutes will, for 10 minutes, if she sends him out, you're not going to get much, you know, Social Security. He kept him 2 hours, he examined him, the doctor. And then when she called me, she says, he declares him 100% disabled. But I never found out what, how, when, or when. It was never told. But then I knew that he was a very ill man. And then right after I mean, it took like 3 years for the cancer to develop. And somehow then he died. As I said, I went to Israel right after, because he wouldn't fly. And when I went to Israel, it's very nice, it's a beautiful country, and you feel so free there too, really. And it was fine, but there are things we're so used to in America. There, you gotta wait during the day, the sun shines and warms your water, you know, on top of the roof. I can take a shower here midnight, you know, I feel like it. Forget it. You have to take a shower when the water is up. You know, there are many other things. I said, I'm not a pioneer anymore, I'm too old for that. I like my little luxuries here in America, you know. Besides, there was no heating. The little things just for electricity. And God forbid you put on 2 or 3, they all blew. There's not that much thing. So I wasn't ready to go and live there. But, and he said, Mom, I'm treading water, it isn't so easy to live here and all that. And finally, I said, look, if you want to come to America, I'm going to help you, but sending you money there, it's just going to go down the drain, it's nothing. And besides, he was in the army there. And I didn't like that too much either, you know. And, which I'm wrong perhaps, but anyway. But I said, no, if your wife wants to come, fine, not you. Your wife has to want to come, because I don't want you to say anything later that I pushed you. But she wanted to come too, and she came. And they came 14 years ago, and that's what made me come here then.
How many grandchildren do you have?
I have 4 grandchildren. One from my eldest son in New York, he's 17, and 3 from my son here, which 2 are girls. One is 20, gonna be 20, the other one is 11, and my grandson who's 17, autistic, unfortunately. Terrible, terrible illness. One should never know from it. It is so incomprehensible that nobody can figure out what it is. He's prone to violent outburst because of frustration. Not to parents, but you know, he'll smash everything inside. So they have to carry a lot of burden.
And when you came down here in '91, you said,
Yes.
were you retired by then, or?
I was retired, yeah. You know, I still tried to go, but I did find a job here because I was so involved with them coming over, my husband dying and all that, you know, so I couldn't do much. But when I came here, I said I have to do something, and I worked for a Mr. Miller, who's in Charles Street. They have a fur shop, but I worked, he also had clothes in mall. I was there with him for a while, and then he closed up, and I went and worked also on fur, I know. Yes.
So now, what you said in other interviews that you go to schools and talk about your...
Yes, I do speak. They asked me, they called me, I think it's like 13 years ago, they called me from the Jewish Council here in Baltimore. They asked me what I would like to tell my story, which I had not done in New York, because you see, there was a long period of time when we came until they first started interviewing people that somehow they didn't want to hear anything. The Jews didn't want to hear anything because there's always the guilt that they didn't do enough, they felt, you know. So they rather brushed it off and said, don't think of the past, think of the future. So we kept quiet for many, many years. And then all of a sudden there came that spark, maybe through the children and grandchildren, where they said, why don't you talk about it? Why don't you say anything about it? So then we started talking, but not in New York, I didn't. We only gathered together, we used to speak of our experiences, each one of us, to each other. But then here they asked if we would like to go and speak in schools, and we said, why not? If they ask us, we'll go. So, being that I had the experience with the nuns, they tried to get me into Catholic schools. But I wouldn't say the majority were Catholic schools, but I did go to public school. You know, I went to Bel Air somewhere, and even around there, you know, further north, and one the Trinity School, they call me every year, they want to hear me. So fine, so I'm going there. So I felt like, why don't you film me one time, and you know, then I don't have to come there and say, no, it's not the same thing as having the impact from you talking to them. So that's what I did. And I also spoke in some churches downtown Baltimore. They invited me, you know. And I went and spoke to adults then, you know. And I even went to a Passover. They made a mock Passover Seder in one place, I don't remember where, also somewhere around Baltimore in the outskirts. And it was, which is the closest to the Catholic? Is it Evangelical? No. Presbyterian? No. There is one that is the closest.
Oh,
They're all
Episcopalian.
Episcopalian. Right. They invited me, and they had made a Seder, you know, and that I should explain to the people more what it meant, you know, and all the thing. And so, you know, I did go, and I was impressed, and I liked it very much, because finally,
Oh, the tape died.
I'm sorry.
Keep
Yeah.